Edwin Walker joins us right now with the U.S. Law Shield to dive into these gun law proposals that are coming out from Democrats, some Republicans hopping on board as well. And Edwin, let's just simply ask the question, do we think something comes of this? And if so, will there be some common sense measures as part of it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your program this morning. I think that what obviously, Dianne Feinstein filed a bill yesterday to ban bump stocks, which the Las Vegas shooter allegedly used a bump stock. For those listeners who don't know what a bump stock is, it's a non-mechanical way of allowing somebody to pull the trigger faster. And so it doesn't alter the gun. Unlike most media sources, it does not convert a semi-automatic rifle into a fully automatic rifle. It's just simply a device that allows somebody to pull the trigger faster. So these things are kind of in the firearms community looked at as sort of a novelty. I don't even know anybody who owns them. I've never seen one in person. So in that respect, it is such a niche thing that there probably would be some movement to ban these or restrict these in some way. However, what you have to keep in mind is that with most legislation, the bill that Dianne Feinstein filed went one step too far. So it said that it wanted to ban trigger cranks, which are another very specific, not very widely known novelty item, and bump stocks, which are novelty items. But then it goes further. It says any other device that has the effect of allowing somebody to pull a semi-automatic trigger faster. Now, that could be anything. That could be a simple, run-of-the-mill, done every single day trigger assembly.
And I'm being told, Edwin, that could be, and Steve Lamb is our resident weapons expert. He's got a cache of weapons, from here to Corsicana. A rubber band or a shirt tail or anything like that could do this.
Yeah, it says any device. And, it sort of takes you back to the old West days, and I hope this is a reference that's not lost on most people. But the early revolvers, the early Colt revolvers were single action. That means you had to pull the hammer back, and then you had to pull the trigger to fire the weapon. Well, if you'll notice in the old West movies, whenever the gunman pulls his six-shooter and hits the top of the hammer with his hand and fires it so rapidly. Well, what they used to do was they would take a piece of wire and they would wire back the trigger. So in a sense, they only had to engage in one motion, that pulling back the hammer. As soon as the hammer went back, it immediately went forward. And so, that wire, the tying of the wire around the trigger, would fit under this Dianne Feinstein bump stock ban.
Now, what's interesting, though, is John Cornyn from Texas apparently has come out in support of looking at, I'm not saying he's supporting an automatic ban of these slide fires or bump stocks, as you referred to them, but it looks as if he's willing to at least bring up the conversation of banning these.
Well, that's what the media is very dogged in their pursuit of any sort of, gun, looking at quote unquote common sense gun laws, that it's gotten to the point where in order to just placate the media sensationalism around this, you have to say, well, sure, we're willing to talk about anything. And perhaps that's it. Perhaps this is, you take this bill that she filed, you say, okay, bump stocks, even though this is the first time that I am aware of a bump stock being used in a crime, even though they've been on the market for 10 years, this is the first time they've been used, but say, okay, bump stocks. If you want to pass a law that says bump stocks are illegal, we could consider that, but you always have to look at their motives. And is this just simply the proverbial camel's nose under the tent?
Yeah. What's next? That's always the question. Okay, if you give them a little bit, they're going to take the next thing. Edwin, thank you for the insight as always from U.S. Law Shield. Edwin Walker here.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Greg Knapp. This is the Greg Knapp Experience, and because of the Vegas killer and the massacre that he unleashed, we're talking about guns a lot, of course. And the Democrats have been pushing gun control like they always do when something like this happens, but some interesting things have been happening this time. we've got the Washington Post article I brought you early in the week of the young lady who was working for Nate Silver's 538 website, where she was trying to crunch numbers from gun control all around the world and show, she thought she'd be able to show how gun control decreased homicides and decreased mass shootings, and she found out she couldn't. She found out that it didn't work, and it changed her mind, and it's blowing the leftist minds. But then we have the other part of, hey, there's these things called the bump stocks. It's a piece of plastic that you can put in here with the magazine that if you're putting forward pressure on the gun and you're keeping your finger right in front of the trigger, it will actually help your semi-automatic rifle fire at a very high rate, the rate of some automatic weapons. You don't have to pull the trigger every time. It's pushing the trigger against your finger, and it's doing it at a rate that's very difficult to do as a human being. And so should we get rid of those? And so now we've got the NRA saying, yeah, sure, okay, we can talk about that. Republicans saying, yeah, sure. White House, yeah, sure. And I said yesterday, I really don't care. The point is, will it really change what a mass killer could do? And will it save any lives? And what happens next? So I'm bringing in Edwin Walker to talk about it. He is program attorney for U.S. Law Shield. You can go to uslawshield.com. They study this stuff all the time, and they're there to help you if you're a gun owner as well. Edwin, welcome to the program.
Hello. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's start with the bump stocks, because if I'm a betting man, these are going to be declared illegal. Do you agree?
Probably. And the reason is because, even though, and this is sort of typical of politics, this is the first incident that I am aware of where a killer of any kind has used a bump stock. And they've been available for about 10 years or so. And so this is the first time that they've ever been used in such a terrible way. And now they're probably going to be outlawed. The good folks at Slide Fire, who make the most popular bump stock, who developed the bump stock, they'll all lose their jobs and their company will go out of business. And, it's all because this guy chose to use this particular item.
Right. Now, but Edwin, people would say,
there's no other reason.
But Edwin, people say, well, but why would we ever have allowed these to be legal? If we decided back in 1934, because of Al Capone, that we, and gangs like his, that we wanted to take away the right of an individual to own a fully automatic weapon. And in 1986, we said you can't own one unless it was purchased and registered before 1986. And we have all these hoops you got to jump through to get an automatic weapon, and very few people have them. Then why would we ever make it legal to essentially turn your semi-automatic into a rifle that can fire at automatic rates? Why would we ever have allowed that to begin with?
Well, the thing is that the machine gun, the difference between semi-automatic and automatic is a mechanical difference, mechanically how the gun operates. And so what the U.S. Congress did way back in 1934 is they said, you cannot have a gun that fires, or civilians cannot have a gun, well, I guess they can, they just have to pay a tax, a gun that fires that expels more than one bullet from the barrel with one pull of the trigger.
Right.
Now, with regard to accessories, human beings have always been looking for ways to create accessories that improve the accuracy and efficiency of their firearm. If you just go to it, there are shops dedicated to just selling firearms accessories.
No, I totally get that. Hold on, but I totally get that. But what I was trying to get to is the reason that you wanted to get rid of the right for everybody to have a fully automatic machine gun was because of the damage it could do and the damage it was doing in the Al Capone era. So my point is simply, it didn't make sense then. Does it make sense then to allow these aftermarket products that can essentially fire at the same rate? I mean, you go back to 1934, not only did you have to pay a tax, you had you had the background check, you had the chief had to sign off, the chief of police had to sign off on you having this thing. Right? I mean, it was, and even now with the extra tax and the amount of money it costs to get this, it's extremely difficult to get. So the point, I guess what I'm just getting at is, I don't think there are many people who think that you should have a semi-auto that can fire at the rate of an auto.
Well, that's obviously why we're going to have the debate.
Right.
And before Sunday, what I'm saying is that 95% of the population, I'm guessing, didn't even know these things exist.
Agreed.
In fact, there's even a large percentage of the quote unquote firearms community who didn't know that these things exist because
I'm one of them.
They're somewhat of a novelty. They're prior to and of course the thing about it is that nobody looks at this and says, "Wow, I could kill a lot of people." I mean, you have to be a truly demented person that's your first thought that you could use this for. Mostly, what it was used for is that it was designed as a way to assist people in pulling the trigger, people who may have been arthritic or had difficulties. But more practically, it was a good way to waste a huge amount of ammunition.
Yeah, it was fun for people who wanted to be able to fire at about an automatic rate that could never do it because they couldn't afford to pay for that at a gun range or they couldn't afford to have it on their own. So there was a bunch of people out on the range or out in the woods that thought it would be fun to see what it would feel like. And I get that.
Correct.
And here's the thing, the part on your part, Ed, but hold on, I just want to throw this out there on the part that you're talking about. Only 3 times since 1934 have we had a crime committed with a fully automatic weapon. 3 times since 1934. We've got, if you go online, you can see ways that people already create their own bump stocks. You can see that you can use a belt loop. You can use a rubber band. As you mentioned, before this killing, I haven't been able to find any instance of somebody using a bump stock, to create a crime. But that doesn't matter. What we're talking about now is emotion and what feels good, aren't we?
Well, that's correct. And that's why, that's why we're, like I said, that this has brought this to the level of people observing it. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of Republicans and the NRA saying, yeah, we can address this, because they know that in the end it affects a very, very, very few people. There are not many people that are going to be upset that they can't get bump stocks or have bump stocks taken away. Right. But if you look at the broader picture, this is somewhat of an insidious movement because, and I'm sure that if the gun folks and Second Amendment folks and people who love self-defense could make a deal, if they could say, look, we're going to outlaw trigger cranks, which are even sort of more primitive than bump stocks, but essentially do the same thing. If we outlaw trigger cranks, if we outlaw bump stocks, and then that's it. Okay, we're done. This, don't try to. Next, we're going to talk about laser sights, and next we're going to talk about foregrips, and next we're going to talk about collapsible stocks, and all these other accessories that the left could say, oh, well, this makes killing easier or faster or more deadly. I love that one. Things that make things more deadly, which all guns we know are deadly. Then I think that would be acceptable, but that's not going to happen. And in fact, we see that with that piece of Dianne Feinstein legislation itself, where it says this bill outlaws trigger cranks, bump stocks, and then it goes that one step further that is very, very dangerous. It says, or any other device that increases the rate of fire of a semi-automatic. Which you're right, could be anything, could be a belt, could be a rubber band. I most certainly think it includes trigger assemblies.
And what about this? Couldn't it also include
silica?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, couldn't it also include the size of the magazine? Because if your magazine holds 30 rounds, you're going to fire at a higher rate than a magazine that holds 15, because when the 15 end up, you got to reload, compared to when the 30 ends, you got to reload. So there's a lot of ways you can interpret that.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. I deal, my practice is we do a lot of criminal defense issues, a lot of self-defense issues, and so I'm very, very keen at reading statutes, particularly penal code statutes where the government's trying to send somebody to prison. And to me, penal code statutes have to be written precisely, they have to be written specifically, and they can't be open to interpretation, especially interpretation / abuse. And that's what that law does.